All right, welcome. Today we are here with Randall Scherer. Is that how you spell your name or say your name?
hmm
Yep, Randall
Yeah,
Scherer of High Tech High, who we were lucky enough to have come out and give us some in-service on project-based learning and what they're doing at High Tech High in California. It was a great couple days. Teachers were very excited. Administrators were very excited. It created quite a buzz. So we actually had some follow-up questions from teachers that we wanted to address, as well as we had some requests from people who couldn't make the day, and they'd like to hear Randall's thoughts and insights on project-based learning. So we thought we'd do this Hangout on air for people who can watch now, but also for those who would like to watch later. So I'll let Randall introduce himself.
hi, my name is Randy Scherer, and I'm an 11th grade humanities teacher at Heights, which is one of the high-tech high schools in San Diego, California. I've been here for 10 years, since this is my 10th year, since we opened this particular school.
Excellent. And Randy brings quite a fabulous beard to the High Tech High
That's right, that's right.
environment as well. A little bit jealous there, but all right. So, can you give us a little bit of kind of background into High Tech High philosophy and sort of then lead into where project-based learning fits within that larger philosophical framework?
Definitely. The high-tech high schools are a network of small schools. We're driven by some design principles. There's four of them. Everything that we do is, as much as possible, we strive to make it personalized. We strive to really bring the adult world into school. We have a common intellectual mission for everyone in our school, which is documentable real growth and success beyond the school environment. And those were the original three design principles, and since I've been here, we've added a fourth, which is teachers and students as co-designers of their educational experiences. We use projects because we believe projects are the best, most powerful way to really provide both access and challenge for every student to construct a really meaningful, lasting, and useful education. And all of this that I'm saying actually grew out of the New Urban High School project, which was a research project into what makes what principles successful schools have in common. That was 20 or so years ago. And our two co-founders were originally just classroom teachers for a long time, dealing with the day-to-day experiences of working in just a large public school. And they started to see what could make classes really successful, and they started to see what sorts of obstacles stand in the way of teachers and families and students from really accessing a meaningful education.
Excellent. All right. So, based on that, where does PBL kind of fit in with that sort of philosophy, that overall framework there?
Okay. So PBL is the method. Realistically, if there was something better out there, we'd probably try it. And high-tech high schools are a very dynamic place. I mean, this is my 10th year, and I've seen a lot of changes. I've seen a new design principle grow and become part of what we do. That's teachers and students as co-designers of their educational experience. The simple fact from what I've seen is that the world is project-based, and school just isn't normally. And the world demands that people make things of value and share them. And the world brings people together. And the world, the actual real world of work or of having a family or of being a member of society forces people to present their work to one another and to develop real three-dimensional, flexible, multidisciplinary expertise. And I taught in a traditional public high school before I worked here for a few years, and I attended nothing but typical schools on my way here. And I also actually worked in the real world. I worked in publishing. I had no intention of becoming a teacher when I was in school. I didn't like school at all, actually. When I got to actually work in publishing, what I saw was that there was really no connection at all between almost anything I had done in school other than be on the high school newspaper and what I was asked to do in the real world. And as I grew up a little bit, and as I've come to work at High Tech High, what I've realized is that's pretty much true for almost everyone. That
So
there's
the only reason that, I mean, if I'm hearing you correct, the only reason that your experience at the high school newspaper related to what you did after school is because that was probably a choice that you made.
yeah. That was, and that was something where I really cared about it, and I wanted to work hard on my writing because people were going to read it, and if they didn't, there was probably a reason for that. It probably had to do with, maybe not being known as a good writer. I had to develop a reputation so that people would want to read the things I wrote. I had to impress my peers so that I could get assigned to good stories. I had to work hard and make sure that my stories were deserving of publication, and I was part of a team that was really trying to make something that people would care about. And we got real feedback from the real world. Parents would tell us what they thought of the articles, especially if their kids were in them. And other teachers would tell us what they thought of them, and our friends would look at them and see what they thought of them. And to me, that was just a lot of fun. And it's not really that different, I don't think, from the reason why kids work hard to be good at sports, or they work hard in their art class, or they work hard in a music class or a theater class or anything like that. There's actually, or in a woodshop class or anything, maybe engineering. There actually already is a lot in typical public high schools that already is really project-based. It's already happening.
Right.
And really what we've done at our school is very simple. There's no new ideas here. All we've done is taken what we know really works in places like art and music and journalism and engineering and woodshop, and we've just applied that to all of the other classes. So, as an English and history teacher, when I taught at a normal, typical school, and when I went to normal, typical schools, I assigned, literary analysis essays, and younger children I would see doing book reports and things like that. And one person would read that, maybe the teacher, maybe they would skim it, and leave some comments on it, and it would be given back to the kid. And maybe the student's mom or dad might look at it, and then it would get crumpled in the bottom of a backpack. And even something simple like just publishing a literary magazine. I mean, most schools already do that. Well, there really isn't, in my opinion, a whole lot of reason why the literary analysis essay couldn't just take that one extra step and be part of a literary magazine and maybe promote a literary culture on campus. And it doesn't have to be separated out to an after-school club. It could actually be the real work of the English class, because if you really love English literature and you pursue that, that's probably what you're going to be doing anyway.
Right.
And if you love physics, you might be headed towards engineering or something like that. And if you love math, you'll probably produce all sorts of code, or you might be a statistician, or you might publish articles in a scholarly journal, or you might build things. And what we really want to do is break down the barriers that stop kids from doing that stuff, because those barriers really don't exist in the real world. It's actually expected that people will make those leaps outside of theory and take things to practice, and it's expected that people will make leaps beyond just their individual discipline, and they will work collaboratively or work broadly intellectually.
Excellent. So you talked a little bit about feedback and sort of relevance and how it's tied to motivation. So can you kind of drill down on that a little bit and kind of tie it to maybe an example, so people who are just kind of learning about PBL can kind of see what that looks like sort of in a classroom environment?
Absolutely. There's two really easy ways to generate meaningful feedback for students, and they're two sides of the same coin, and it's critiques and exhibitions. Students practice for their sports team because sports teams have exhibitions. Students practice violin because you're going to play in front of an audience. And students work hard when they need to build something because that thing they're building is supposed to be useful. So all we have to do is take that and extend it. So I came from the world of publishing. I worked in journalism briefly, and as I worked as a freelance writer for a while. And my students do a lot of that stuff because I know personally how to exhibit that work. And that project is a very natural project that would exist if you pursued a humanities education. I structure critiques regularly in my class to follow the same types of critique protocols that I know would work in a college environment, or I know actually happen for real writers. and I create exhibitions that are actually really, for me, book release parties, or magazine releases, or newspaper launches, or web launches. Now that's not to say that every single project has a large exhibition like that. We had a question actually about how many exhibitions do I do per year. I do two large exhibitions like that per year. But if I have students working on an article and let's say they interviewed an expert, I have a lot of small scale exhibitions where students will produce.
Sorry, we lost you right when you said you were going to say they interviewed an expert and then you dropped. So can you start from there? Sorry about that.
Okay, so I have, as I was saying, 2 large-scale exhibitions usually per year, 1 per semester, and that's where like a big product, like a book, is released, and we are trying to promote sales and all of that. But for things that are more smaller assignments along the way, like let's say, for example, I want students interviewing veterans in the community. I might have students exhibit that work by turning their interview of a veteran into a journalistic article or an edited and presentable, publishable interview. And then it might simply be placed on that student's website or their digital portfolio. And that link, I'll ask them to exhibit it digitally by just sending an email to their parents, the person that they interviewed. I'll usually ask them to pick a few friends that are not in this class, and I'll usually ask them to send it to their advisor or another adult on campus that they respect. Okay. And so I can have lots of mini exhibitions. Another way to have a mini exhibition is to work for a short time on something, exhibit it on the walls in a public space in your school, and invite other classes to come and interact with the work in some way, or to create work that you know another class needs. And all of these things can be done in modular ways throughout a semester. And what I do is design a series of modules with small exhibitions, and they all build towards producing something big.
So in essence, the feedback they're getting on these smaller or modular expositions, they then in turn take that and incorporate it into continuing to work on that and build to something larger.
Right, and we work with that directly. We work with that feedback directly in class. So yeah, students will be soliciting feedback from these smaller audiences or from very local audiences, like we're going to share our work maybe with, I'm an 11th grade teacher, we might share work with a 9th grade class, or we might be mentors, which we were last year for a 4th grade class, or something like that.
Okay, cool. All right, well, how about we get into some questions? Is that all right with you?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, so go ahead.
Oh, go on.
I was going to say some of the questions that have come in are, what are the features of a good driving question?
Okay. So yeah, there's a few questions here about driving questions. Okay, a good driving question should be expressed in simple language, and it should get under the student's skin. The ideal driving question results in some sort of conversation / maybe even argument at home. You want them to bring it up at dinner, and it should be authentic, meaningful to the students, to their own personal experience in life, and the teachers and eventually students should be working on developing a sophisticated answer to what seems like a deceptively simple question. So some examples from my class are, I did a project in which I was partnered with a biology class, and we were researching indicator bacteria in various aquatic environments in San Diego. So we were looking at a river, 2 different bays, and the ocean, and dealing with indicator bacteria and all of that. Our question was, is it safe to go in the water? And you can say yes, or you can say no, and eventually we were looking for really sophisticated geography, and dealt with economics, and dealt with how we know what we know, and how scientific I guess like information gathering protocols actually really work, and whose responsibility is it to ensure that coastal ecosystems are safe or are accessible. Another project I did, also partnered with my biology teacher, was around food, And there's a lot of physiology in that project and a lot of, I guess, like cellular science. And for that project, students did learn how to cook and followed diets, and we used food as a vehicle to culture and humanities. And the essential question was, should I eat that? Really, really simple. No, you should not eat that. It's hot Cheetos, all right? Or yes, you should eat that. And some of the questions some of the answers, what we were really looking for was some decision-making about what disciplines students would bring into their answer. So sometimes students said, no, I shouldn't eat that because they were aiming to maintain a traditional cultural diet, and this food, although it's healthy and although it's, you know, fine by modern standards, might not mesh with cultural preferences, or it might not mesh with their political or ideologies about what's fair to workers who produce food and ship it around the country. Or there might be an entirely different answer where it might be physiological, that a student might be eating a particular diet because they're aiming to do well at sports that semester. And they have to maybe reconsider other types of priorities. So we started with really simple answers. Kids said things like yes, no, or I don't know. Right. And we systematically tried to develop, by actually having students follow the diets and doing the whole project, we tried to develop these rich, complex answers where actually every answer was really different than the next one. And some other ones I've seen that are great. I heard one, it was, is America making me sick? Was an interesting one in terms of what's in our environment physically and what's in our intellectual environment. One I'm working on right now with students, we just started this, is what can I discover in the cultural DNA of San Diego? Actually, it's what can I discover in the DNA of San Diego? And in biology, we're looking at plant genetics, and we're actually doing experiments in plant genetics. And in humanities, we're aiming to sequence the cultural DNA of the superorganism of San Diego.
Yeah, wow, pretty cool.
And that is really interesting. So yesterday we had a massive argument in class about how cultures are actually written out of the genetic code of cities, that happens. Every time there's development, or every time there's new populations, or there's migration or immigration, that cultural information is gained and lost, and there are natural and unnatural processes for that to happen. And
students are discovering all this for themselves? Yeah, I mean, you're not sitting up there lecturing them, telling them this.
No, absolutely not. I'm not. So in that, actually, there's a question in there, which is sort of like, where is the time and place for the lecture in a project-based learning environment? Mm-hmm. And there is a really big for it, and it's after they've had their experiences. Because if the lecture is the leading thing, if there's weeks of lecture before the students go out into the field and do something, or before they meet the real experts and do the interviews or whatever, if the lecture is before that, then what happens is you actually never get to that, because the experience of hearing the lectures and doing the practice problems is, let's face it, only engaging for some students.
Right.
So when that becomes a disappointing experience in class, students have this other different learning experience that was never really intended, which is like, oh, that teacher talks a lot. Or, oh, all you have to do is look in the back of the book for the answers to the odd problems. Or, oh, he has bio or chemistry first, so give me your homework during lunch or whatever. That's actually what students learn, totally logically, based on experience, with evidence. And by leading with real-world experiences and leading with connections with the community and connections with the local environment, literally taking a walk, lectures after that can become reflective experiences and meaningful experiences, because those direct teaching moments really help apply meaning to experiences students have had, and they really are seen much more often as helpful ways to get from a question to an exhibition.
Right.
So in my class, I do stand in the front of the room and do direct instruction on how to write sentences and how to handle quotes and paragraphs and all of that. But I do it after they know that they're writing a book or a magazine, articles have gotten started, research has already happened, like, I mean, in the field research, like they've gone out and taken photos, they've done interviews, and there's a real pressing need because they can see the deadline. They know publication is coming. They know that someone sat down for an interview with them, or someone led them on a site visit through some interesting location, and they took photos, and they know that that all of this is going to be real, and their parents have gotten the invite and all of this stuff. And
So the
now,
relevance is there
yeah,
for
now
them.
at that point, it's okay for me to stand up there and talk. You know, it's
There's
like,
motivation
please
and
help me.
relevance there. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I could see the next question. How does one ensure students achieve common content objectives, and how can teachers assess this effectively when these experiences may take them in all these different directions?
Okay. And there's some other stuff in here we've already gotten about grades, and so I'm just going to talk about that also in
Cool.
that question. Um, the first thing you need to know about high-tech high stuff is that our transcript looks extremely normal. Kids get letter grades, just like they would anywhere else, and that is in order to make sure that colleges know at least a little bit of what goes on in our school. That it shouldn't be, that we want students that have no disadvantage, you know, because they're at this crazy school. So I give students individual grades in my class on lots of different things. I never give group grades, although I do lots and lots of group work. Each individual is accountable for, or rewarded for, or for their own individual performance. When I work with projects, what I do is make sort of like concentric circles. And I think I even shared a document like this, but it's boxes with the UK visit, where I first figure out what is absolutely essential for students to master, like what is the reason why we're doing this project. And then I get a little bit bigger, a little broader, what is important for them to know, and what is nice for them to be exposed to. And then as I go out and out, I'm expecting differing levels of engagement or mastery or whatever, and I know that I prioritize that up front so that I can manage my own expectations. And for me, as a humanities teacher, I want really strong research skills across a variety of methods, and I want really strong writing skills. Not every humanities teacher agrees with that, and there's lots of humanities teachers who do other things who aren't necessarily as heavily oriented towards, let's say, writing as I am. And the same thing comes out in lots of other, like math classes and science classes, that there's got to be this core skill, usually, that is important. That's really the reason why you're doing a project. And actually, that brings me to something that I would want to share, which is that the content that students work with in these projects is important, but the specific content actually is irrelevant. That whether a student specifically goes into depth into World War II or Vietnam or whatever, it doesn't matter, I don't think. It's important to have that content piece because that is a vehicle for actually accessing deeper learning. And I mean, I was a normal, typical teacher in a regular school with, 1 million students and 7 classes a day or whatever it was, and 40 kids in a room in desks and rows. And I know that cover everything from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, and from the beginning of time to the end of history. I know that doesn't actually last. That there's something else that lasts out of that experience, and it's often actually not something a teacher intends. And one of the things I've found in here, in this method of teaching or in this type of a school, is that deeper learning and true mastery can be achieved through this deep inquiry, where there's like a highly motivated reason for, or highly engaging and motivational reason for engaging with the content. But if one student in my class is working on one piece of history and one's working on another, I mean, I have some basics that I want to make sure that everyone knows, but if it's the difference of one war or another, or in biology, like one thing what we'll get into is where DNA is coming from, like what particular cell we're looking at, and it's slightly different, from different things. And but there's some basic knowledge about DNA that's going to be in common across this, just like there's going to be some basic systems that show up in math, solving methods that show up in engineering, or really in any science class. And our teachers start to get pretty attuned to how do we cut through all of the stuff that's on the surface and get right to the thing that's underlying all of this, so that we have, and so we can access real critical thinking. And the rest is actually, I hate to say it, but it's arbitrary.
Well, you're looking more at skills and higher level thinking than you are just the content per se. Like the content is, like you said, a vehicle to teach these critical thinking skills, etc.
Yeah, and it's not to say that it's not that content is irrelevant, it's the specific content that is. Content itself is important. We want T-shaped students where there is some real depth, but whether that line goes exactly into my personal interest in U.S. history or English or something else, it doesn't matter to me. It just has to go somewhere.
Right. Okay. Well, we have just a couple minutes left, Randy, and so this has been awesome. Thank you. But I wanted to ask you if you could summarize or give us some words of wisdom, or from your experience of doing this for 10 years, could you pass on any any pitfalls you ran into earlier, or maybe a pitfall you ran into last week, or something you'd like to pass on to other teachers to kind of who are interested in either pursuing this or taking it to the next level, or anything you could offer would be great.
Sure. So I've had awful projects that I've fallen flat on my face, an embarrassing number of times. And I would say that there's some things that I've learned along the way. First, that in a PBL environment, there's sort of three things to think about, which is you've got a product you're trying to make, you've got content that you want kids to really learn, and there's a process you're going to go through to get that content into the kids and get that product made. And in those three things, you've got to feel really confident about at least two of them. I do a lot of publications because I know how to make them, and I know what they look like, or what they're supposed to look like at the end. So for me, I get really flexible on content, as long as we're being reasonable and this is still humanities. And other teachers are different. Other teachers are extreme content masters, and they loosen up a little bit on a particular product. Now, that said, one of the pitfalls I fell into once was trying to allow students to do products that didn't have the same production cycle. If some students make a documentary film and other students write an article, well, they can't respond to critiques at the same speed. So it makes it extremely hard to do the process part. And that was a pitfall that I had to go through and learn the hard way. And everyone in Kentucky can just avoid that pitfall right now that you all know. The production cycles have to match. You can have students do a photo essay and an article, or a fictionalized version of something and a poem, but because they can have critiques on the same day, and they can respond at roughly the same speed to producing second and third and fourth drafts. But as soon as you throw in something that's like build a sculpture or make a movie,
right,
and you mix it in with that, well, your class is going to be crazy. So just don't do that. And I've tried to do projects where I'm not the expert on what the product really looks like or what the process is, and what happens with that is I end up not knowing how to answer questions, which is really painful. And it's hard. It's hard for any teacher to be stuck there constantly being like, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know what type of glue you're supposed to use because I didn't do the project myself. So do the project yourself.
Yeah.
I think another piece of wisdom has been lead with experience. Get kids out of the classroom right away. Not every student walks into a physics class already interested in rockets, but if you take them out on day one and make those water pressure 2-liter soda bottle rockets and launch them on campus and try to measure which one went highest, which one went the fastest, which one went the farthest. Or not every kid shows up into an ecology class automatically interested in rocks, but if you take them outside and try to find an interesting collection, you can use experience as an equity tool so that people have a common language and that abstract examples on the board will make sense because we all did something together. And the other big idea that I learned the hard way was although I do lots of big projects, I don't. All of my big projects are broken down into modules that are mini projects. I'm doing a publication, a book with students that has photography and primary source research, and we had to travel places and meet people and all this stuff. Each one of those things is a mini project. So for 2 weeks, we will interview adults who are experts in the community. And for 1 week, we will take photos and organize them and write captions. And for one other week, we will do something else that's related to whatever that particular project is. But I always break it down to mini projects that have an exhibition at the end. The idea there is that deadlines are always visible. If you have an 8-week-long project, your students will definitely work on the 7th week and the 4th and 5th day, but that feel like it's happening now, you know? And also, if you do mini projects with really simple exhibitions, just like bring another class in or email this work to their parents and get some feedback, then people know what you're doing. And you can do crazier things because everyone sees it, and the transparency invites more and more people to get excited about your work. It's just like a team that has a game every week. If a team has a game every week, it's easy for the community to get excited, and if they don't do well, it's easy for people to say, like, hey, you know, maybe we need a new coach, right? So the same thing happens. It's almost like every week we know that we're going to share our work, and that really right there creates a culture of that kids just want. Kids want to be seen as doing things that are positive. Even if we know that like teenagers, I think, have like an impetus to resist authority, they also have an impetus or an imperative to build, even if it's just a community of their own friends, or even if it's a community online. Did you just freeze?
And I think we got you back. I think you
All right.
were talking about building community, and you just kind of froze.
Yeah.
Click back in.
So they really, it's the same reason students form, high school bands when they put that in. And I think that there's a lot of ways that schools can really harness that energy really, really positively, so that school is a fun place and that students see their personality in the school and they see their work up on the walls, and they know that when they show up every day, that they're at a place that cares about them and that provides a chance for them to do something really meaningful.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Randy. We really appreciate you coming out to Kentucky and spending some days with us to share, obviously, your love of this teaching and project-based learning, and to share what you guys have learned at High Tech High. And we also appreciate you taking the time for this follow-up hangout. People are very excited that we were able to capture this, and so they can watch it later. And you addressed some of the questions people had after you had left, so that has been really awesome. So I just want to say thank you very much. And
absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Any final words before we log off?
If you have further questions, just send them my way or send them to Ben, or let me know how I can continue to help.
And one last thing before we leave, they can check out some resources on High Tech High's website. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can go to hightechhigh.org. I would say maybe start clicking of our videos. We have a project archive, and we have a journal called Unboxed. So it's hightechhigh.org/unboxed, UNBOXED. And that journal has lots and lots of articles in it about teachers' experiences going through this themselves. And it has project cards in there that offer snapshots into what a whole variety of projects look like, from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Awesome. Excellent. All right. Thanks again, Randy. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.